The poem Visitor by Nissim Ezekiel was published in 1965. The poem is based upon a common Indian superstition that if we hear a crow cawing on the roof or a wall of our house in the morning, we should expect a guest to arrive in the course of the day, and we should therefore be ready to receive him or her. The poet here narrates his own experience of having heard a crow cawing and expecting a guest, and then finding that his expectation has proved true. However, the arrival of the guest or the visitor brings only disappointment with it, because the poet discovers to his dismay that the visitor has nothing worthwhile to say to him, and their conversation has turned out to be trivial and insubstantial. He then comes to the conclusion that most events in human life are of the ordinary kind, with nothing momentous or weighty about them. The poet heard a crow cawing 3 times at the window of his room, and this cawing was interpreted by him as a message that he would receive a visitor in the course of the day. Apart from its cawing, the crow had also been looking at the poet with baleful or ominous eyes. Sitting at the window as it did in a sinister posture, its body looked tense and its neck craned like the neck of a woman when she is scolding her husband. The poet had then got the feeling that his room was filled with the voice and the presence of the crow. The poet had been lost in his thoughts, and on hearing the crow cawing, he had felt as if he had been walking in his sleep. He had been feeling concerned about the welfare of all the creatures in this world. And now, after having received the crow's message, he tried to get ready to receive the visitor, who would come and whose views and opinions might clash with his own. The poet waited for the visitor all day. He had been wondering what kind of a person the visitor would be. Perhaps the visitor would be an angel in disguise, or perhaps the visitor would be some spiteful fellow who would come in some strange garb to test his sincerity and integrity, and whose talk would ruin his sleep because of its jarring effect on him. At last the visitor came, but the visitor did not accord to his expectations. The visitor was empty handed, and he had come only to while away, in an idle manner, some of his time in the company of the poet. The visitor was certainly a well intentioned man, and the poet did feel somewhat sympathetic towards him. But the visitor's talk with him proved to be meaningless and trivial. In fact, the talk between the visitor and the poet proved to be even less substantial than the smoke coming from their cigarettes. At the end, the poet found that he had entirely been wrong in his expectation, and that he had failed to see the futility of the visitor's visit. The poet had failed to guess that his visitor would be an ordinary fellow, having no particular or definite or profitable motive in coming to him. The human mind does work in strange and mysterious ways, and it has depths, says the poet. But most of the events which take place in human life are of the ordinary kind. The figure woven into a carpet by the carpet maker may seem to be conspicuous, but this figure represents something ordinary. Equally ordinary is the change in the seasons, and ordinary too are the changes in the relationships of human beings. Thus, most of the happenings in human life are of the ordinary kind.